Well, what brings you here, stranger? Glad to see you here. In the Seared Badlands, we have fine coffee, killer root beer, and the best shortbread this side of the Rio Grande River. I'm telling you. Actually, I had some shortbread yesterday. It was so good. It's like my weakness. Anyway, make yourself at home. We're here again. We're here again, and I'm so happy that you're here and that you've taken time out of your day to be here. Like, you don't understand. That means a lot. And also, what means a lot is I want to thank everyone who's been listening. Last week, I had like a record downloads, and that was 68, which may not sound like a lot, but to me, it's brilliant. Huzzah! Ask any podcaster, writer, blogger, YouTuber, etc., why they do what they do. And mind you, you get different reasons, of course, but most of us are obviously happy to have as many people watch, listen, or read whatever it is that we're doing, how we're communicating. And for me, I have fun with it. But on another level, I want to impact as many people as I can. So that's why I keep harping about getting the word out. So another way of just saying I was thrilled, and thank you for anyone who's helping to make this grow. I'm getting wound up. And speaking of, we're winding up for the holidays, and we're closing in on the day when pretty much most people are checking out, for the rest of the year. Personally, I have found that the general date for that is around the 22nd. I find that after the 22nd of February, most of y'all ain't thinking of doing anything other than, doing the family thing, the holiday thing, sleeping in, all that kind of stuff. I know a lot of workplaces do continue, but many do take some time off. And it's also, that weird time, as I was thinking about this, it's that weird time after Christmas, but before New Year, that it's like that, like where nothing matters, where like nothing counts. Like, I don't know if calories count, like nothing. It just feels aimless. It's like, I think people call it the dead week, and it feels like an episode of the Twilight Zone. So I find personally, though, that period is really good to evaluate and look at the year gone by. And, for me, it's like starting to think about what's coming up ahead. So for me, I'm definitely going to take that time, that dead week, so to speak, and start focusing on like where I want to go and what I want to do in terms of my business and this podcast, everything that I'm doing. Now, I'm not a big dissector of the past and pulling out the lessons, et cetera, but I do a quick check-in with myself. Like, where were my biggest lessons? What would I avoid doing again? What can I carry over into the new year? And those are the kind of things I quickly jot. I don't spend too much time on it. I used to do a word of the year, and I know a lot of people still do that, but I stopped. And I found, for me, eventually it was just too rigid, right? Like, things change, you change. So why stick to one thing? But again, for some, that word anchors them. And so do what's best for you. Have a word of the year, don't have a word of the year. If you do have a word of the year, I'd love to hear what it is. You can drop it in the comments, wherever you watch or listen to this. And I'm going to talk about that too. I've got something. But anyway, enough of that. I was going to go on another tangent, but I value your time. So we're going to get into this. Now this, is a little fun one. So one thing to know about me is I'm a non-smoker. I have never smoked in my life. I think maybe once I tried a cigarette, but I'm glad I haven't, because I know me with my addictive qualities. I would have been like a 2-pack a day guy for sure. And a lot of people in my life did smoke, but most of them have quit. Now working in restaurants, there's a pack of smokers, no pun intended. I don't mean smoking meats either. Like, I don't know, this was back in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, but definitely in the smaller restaurants and stuff, lots of smokers, like more than the average amount. Everything from the chain smokers. There's one guy in particular, I can't remember, just one, like couldn't even finish one before starting the next one. Just, it was constant. They're the smokers that, you can tell they just finished that last puff and just walked in. You can still smell it on them as they're going to the change room. And for the most part, they were all reasonable. And what I mean by reasonable is that they didn't let it get out of hand. So why am I bringing this up, right? Is one thing that really kind of started to cause, not issues, I don't want to say issues, but there was this unspoken contract that smokers had. So when it comes to breaks, okay, so every job got breaks, right? By law, a lot of places you have to give your staff breaks. Now, in restaurants, it's challenging because you're in service. You can't just tell everyone, okay, guys, in the restaurant, everyone just got to wait 15 minutes more. We're all going on our breaks. It doesn't work like that. So it's very challenging to find where you can get your breaks. I don't know how many shifts I've ever done where I really didn't have a break. And but smokers, when they would go out, like it was a given, like there was almost like a like I said, like this unspoken contract with them that there was more allowance for smokers to go. And a lot of times it would be, especially after the rush, like I'm a non-smoker, but I could sense just as the tickets were slowing down and it was becoming really quiet, I could feel the smokers jonesing. And I knew as soon as the rush would finish, they'd say, okay, Paul, can you watch the line while we all, because most of the time I'd be the only one, maybe me and maybe one other person, depending how big the brigade was. But I'm like, okay, just go. And, and they'd be gone 10, 15 minutes and whatnot. And that started to build some resentment. And that it's very common that the smokers feel, the non-smokers feel like they're getting the short end of the butt end of the stick, of the dart, as it's called too. We got the short end because they got to go on their breaks because they had to get their fix. Now, I remember one time, all the smokers went out. And then I decided, well, I'm getting a break too. Like, enough of this nonsense. And I went into like the laundry room, like just a place where we had all the linen and all that. And I was just sitting there. I wasn't doing anything. There was no phones back then. I was just sitting there, just enjoying a sit. And I remember my boss walked in, "What are you doing?" And I looked at him, I said, "If I had a cigarette in my hand, you wouldn't ask me that." And he kind of went away because he was a smoker. He was like one of those chain smokers. But that's the kind of attitude that it had. Like, it's if the non-smokers went out and just loitered in the back alley, the chef might be like, "Oh, what's going on? You guys are..." Well, it's got to be fair. And the question, and that really what comes down to this, and this is what we've been talking about, is this fair? Like, what does fair mean? What's equality? And who cares, right? But it's something that always fascinated me. And simply put, as we dive into this, equal means everyone gets the same thing. Fair is everyone getting what they need to be successful. And so when we step into being fair, it won't always feel equal to everyone. So, for example, let's say a restaurant gives free desserts to anyone who's celebrating a birthday. You go in with, your 3 kids. One of them is celebrating their birthday. Oh, it's their 10th. It's so cute. So they get the cake. They get the little free dessert. Now, the other 2 kids may freak out and say, "That's not fair." And you say, well, it's Melissa's birthday. Of course she gets a cake. But because only 1 or 2 people maybe that night get the cake, it may not feel equal. But if you step back and kind of look at the big picture and realize that the cake offer is open to anyone with a birthday at any time of the year, so it is equal. It's just how you see it, right? Another example, like my youngest son needs special help for school. He gets certain exemptions for certain classes. He he doesn't have the same things that his classmates have to do. So sometimes he's exempted, like I said, for certain things. And he gets a resource room that he can go to anytime during class. He has an extra teacher. Like, is that equal? And at first it may seem like, no, not everyone gets to skip parts of the class. But it is equal in that anyone who has an IEP or whatever gets those same resources. So it is fair because my son and others like him get the support they need to succeed. Someone who's getting A's doesn't need that support, right? Those who have, who suffer with disabilities will often have, like, again, the parking spots closest to the doors of the mall or the store or whatever. It's fair because they need that help in them getting them to the shop or the building with minimal stress or injury or whatnot. So, it also reminds me of when I was in grade school. I used to be in the gifted program. And so once a week, I was taken out of class and brought to another school with a certain classroom with other gifted children from other schools. And we just did our thing. It was awesome. But I remember once in grade 7, my teacher, kind of bullied me sort of, or just was going on, oh, you think you're better and this is not fair. And all. I'm like, well, it is fair because I needed the support I needed because I was so far ahead and school was kind of boring. So it's the perspective. All right. So now that we have an idea of equal and fair, let's go back to the question of the smokers and the non-smokers. Is it fair that the smokers get all that extra time off the line just because they need to get their hit? I don't know. It's a bit of a melon scratcher, right? From an HR or management point of view, it can be a headache. Believe me, it can be a total headache. It depends on the labor laws in that district or country or state or province. But HR and management they have to tread carefully, right? Because there's also the ideas, people bring in the idea of smoking being an addiction or a disorder, all that kind of stuff. For some, the challenge that we have as a manager is the smokers that need their fix. When they don't get it, they become unfocused. Their work gets sloppy. They get grumpy. So the work environment shifts. But so you have that. And on the other hand, the non-smokers, there's the resentment and all that kind of stuff. Again, it's not fair. And so you got to play these two camps kind of, it's a balancing act. And there's no one way that works. And it's challenging, right? And labor laws, yes, but it's very hard to enforce these at times, especially in restaurants. I used to go out with the smokers myself sometimes. I called them my secondhand smoke breaks. Or like I said, or I would wait for people to come back, then I'd take off myself. No one complained. I'm like, y'all got to go. My turn. Thank you. And they're like, okay. But it's just one of those things. I just kept it. No matter what restaurant I went to, where I went, that battle was there. And it was all perception. So, listener, viewer, okay, great, Paul. But what does that have to do with you? How does that affect your day to day? That's another good question. I'm going to answer that just after we have this quick breather. So if you need to go for a smoke, you can go. Well, there you are. Feels like it's been a while. Maybe you went for that smoke break. I popped off for a Panzerato and a pint of chocolate milk. Actually, I didn't. I lied. I wanted to, but I didn't. I wanted to finish this because we got to finish what we started, right? Obviously I've talked about shortbread and Panzerato. I'm hungry. Note to self, eat before recording. Anyway, getting back to what we're talking about. So there may be times where things don't feel fair because you may feel like you're getting hosed somehow. Like I said, getting the short end of the butt. Or you may see someone else being treated unfairly. And you know what? There are many times where you are right. It isn't fair, nor is it equal, nor is there any equity. There's injustice, and I mean, we're seeing this in global proportions now in certain areas of the world. Sometimes we feel that injustice or that unfairness when, let's say, someone young dies, or someone that you super kind and lovely and all that, and they're being abused or mistreated, or a loved one gets cancer, some other serious diagnosis. You may see a qualified person get passed over for a promotion to the CEO's unqualified child. You might see someone hit a parked car and take off, hit and run. And so all of those, it's valid to have the feels. In fact, that triggers our amygdala, the little primitive, the little lizard brain that controls fear and anger. We all have it. And so what this means is that, when we feel like we've been mistreated or treated unfairly, we go into this fight, flight, fawn, or freeze mode with the resulting sense of anxiety or anger. But even when understanding that, it comes down to one thing. How do you see things? Author-illustrator Mary Engelbreit once said, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it. So we've gone from a smoke break to breaking your perceptions and beliefs for a moment here. So how do we overcome that pissy feeling of unfairness that we have, so that we can have a smoother day? And when I say this, as I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about ignoring injustice, just to be clear. There's a time for action and such. What I'm talking about is when you're having a $5 reaction to a 5-cent problem. So just keep that in mind. Again, this is not saying ignore everything. That's not at all what I'm saying. So here are a few tips to overcoming the feelings of anger, of resentment, that anxiety that may brew and bubble up over unfairness. 1, is it worth your energy? Another quote here, author Jonathan Lockwood Huey says, fair is not a useful concept. Life is not fair. You can't make life fair. You can get angry. You can complain about life not being fair. You can attempt revenge, perhaps violently. You can inflict great suffering upon yourself in the name of life being unfair. And life is still not fair. So you can rage against the machine, tire yourself out, drain yourself, and cause even maybe further damage. Or you can accept that not everything is meant to go a certain way. Sometimes the best thing is to step aside and not allow your peace to be disturbed. It comes down to that very, well-known question or quote, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? 2, understand that you can't control everything. I know we want to. And sometimes when unfairness pops up and the anger that comes along with it, it's because we feel like we're not in control of everything. The idea of if I ran the world, blah, 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 we all get into that sometimes, right? But the reality is you don't run the world. You only have command over how you react to the world. It's kind of like filing it under, it is what it is. And again, I don't mean resignation, but acceptance. When you step into that new space of acceptance, you're also shifting from a victim way of seeing things to perhaps something along the lines of survivor. And this is helpful too when you're in a situation that's maybe hits closer to home, where maybe you or someone you love is the target of unfair behavior. Again, accepting is not condoning, but understanding that you can't control it all. All you can do is control how you see the situation and how you respond to the situation. 3, take that energy, that feeling of anger and resentment, etc., and shift it into positive action. You can transmute that negative energy into something that is useful to yourself and perhaps others. Like, for example, you can't control, let's say, what a company is doing in polluting the river. But maybe you can start a petition or whatever, and doing it from the place of loving the river and the environment first, and not focusing on the anger of the company doing the polluting. Of course, that will it'll be an undercurrent, no pun intended there, but you're harnessing the energy into something that is helpful. 4, and this last one could be applied to anything. What is the gift or lesson in this? Is this teaching you anything? Maybe it's patience, or maybe it's compassion. Perhaps you're learning to be more forgiving or self-loving. But all situations have lessons in them. I mean, it sucks at the time. Don't get me wrong. It does. But they all have lessons in them. And even when you feel like lashing out to all the injustices, there's something there for you and you alone. And so be open to listening to those lessons. Those are the ones that are going to help you grow. Okay, so if we go back to the non-smoker's plight, again, as a non-smoker, I moved from that resentment to not caring at all. I don't give a shit anymore. The way I looked at it is their smoking has nothing to do with me. And there are times, when I was working, I would chill out when they were just hacking away on the line. I didn't focus on their 5 to 10 minute breaks and get myself worked up into a frothy lather. I used to. But after I made the switch, I just focused on bettering myself as a cook. I took the opportunity to covering the stations that they asked me to, and to learn more about their stations and how to cook those dishes. How cool is that? It actually helped me in the long run. And I didn't have to focus on the resentment. I was just like turning that into like something positive and useful and meaningful. And like I said before, as a manager, I had to balance the smoke breaks. I allowed some cooks with other ways of giving others, the non-smokers, quick breaks that didn't involve, having to play, seeming like playing favorites. Sometimes I'd let the non-smokers leave a touch earlier or whatever. I'd figure something out. Now, by law, everyone is due their breaks. So I let them have them when, maybe the smokers, like I switched it around. I didn't get emotional about it. I was just very neutral and just made sure everyone got what they needed. And sometimes that meant no, sorry. And that's the approach I take with other issues of unfairness that I may see. Be neutral. And I do the things that I just shared with you. I don't always bat 1,000. I can get worked up. I can get hot and bothered with certain things as well. It could be a small thing. Something I see at the coffee shop or something in the parking lot of the mall or whatever it is. Bigger things, of course. But I always bring myself back to, what is this teaching me? What am I here to learn? How can I grow from this situation? And not inject what's coming up for me and projecting my insecurities and whatever it is that's coming up. Because in the end, you're in control of what upsets you, right? Minimize what gets past your deflector shield and steals your energy. Like, you can minimize that. And by doing that, you'll be a happier camper by doing so. Now, speaking of happy camper, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And you can drop them in the comments on YouTube, or, and I mentioned this earlier, drop them in the Facebook page. I do have a page on Facebook dedicated to the podcast. So you can share whatever it is there. So you don't have to be on YouTube to comment and, create discussions or be a part of discussions. So I started that last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. So it's available. I'm going to put it in the show notes. And speaking of YouTube, we're here at 76 subs. Let's make it 100. Early Christmas gift for Polly. I love seeing this channel grow. Like I said earlier, it just really helps expand. And so if you're watching this, smash the sub button as you see fit. Govern yourselves accordingly. You can also visit my website and learn how I can help you shift your thoughts and beliefs to line up with the kind of life that you want to live. Stop settling and start taking control of your life. And I help create new ways of thinking and acting so that you can live a life, again, just something you can be proud of. All the links will be in the show notes. All right, homies, you know this. Kitchen's closed. Now scram. Get lost.